Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. You know, it says a lot when a president who the black community holds in total disdain has to send a black woman to be their puppet, their crash dummy to put on a show for our benefit. A black woman gets sent by the president to dance and smile in Alabama, and this puppet tells black Alabama voters how much they sympathize with them and remind them of innocent black blood spilled in these places. No, I'm not talking about Kamala Harris. We'll get to her in a moment. I'm talking about Condoleezza Rice. You know, both Condoleezza's father and her grandfather were pastors at a church in Titusville, Alabama. W, when he was making goo-goo eyes at Condi, also made a point to send her to be his shill on the scene to black audiences. And she made it a point to go ahead and pop her wretched head up in Alabama, telling them how much the GOP cares about black folks. So what we see Biden doing with Kamala Harris isn't new at all. It's quite old. White presidents sending black reps, in particular a black female if they got one on the payroll, that's standard issue for them. Just like when Joe Biden likes to send out Simone Mammy Sanders to sell the soap. So, for this year's annual commemoration of Bloody Sunday, which was the police assault on black civil rights protesters on Edmund Pettus Bridge back in the day, you had Kamala Harris go down to Selma, and she does the Democrats' typical annual empty photo op, where they have the Secret Service shut down the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and then the president goes across with Al Sharpton and some other civil rights retreads, and they make sure the white media is in tow to chronicle this do-nothing gesture. This is meant to appeal to the black baby boomers. It reminds them of their youth. It's taking a trip down nostalgia lane. You're not getting anything for it, they're not promising you anything, and these days, they're not even mentioning black people. And I consider it to be particularly perverse that Jim Crow Joe likes to be part of these little get-togethers, because he was mentored by Southern segregationists when he got into the Senate, and he carries on their putrid anti-black legacy. Now, last year, Biden was the one who went to Selma to march across that bridge, very slowly, might I add. That's the way it normally goes. You have the president who goes down there, at least the Democrat presidents. But these days, Joe Biden is in frail physical health, and his mental health is even more fragile. That's the reason why, instead of going to Selma, he instead posted something on the internet. The usual 59 years ago, brave black Americans, clean black Americans, well, the ones who I hadn't locked up yet. They were protesting how they were treated, and some of my good segregationist mentors, they put those niggers in their place. Well, that's not what he wrote, but you know that's what he was thinking. Well, for the few brain cells he's got that still work. So it makes sense that for those reasons alone, Biden didn't want to go do that walk across the bridge this year because he's concerned that he'll fall a few times, if he can even make it across. But he's also concerned that black people, having cornered the president before, are going to voice their demands on camera. The DNC certainly doesn't want to allow for that. So Biden is now hiding behind his internet account because his handlers are trying to limit his public appearances. The man can't walk, can't stand, can't even talk. And when he tries to, it inevitably devolves into gibberish. So that's how Kamala Harris came to be in Selma alone this year. Well, actually, she brought her husband with her, but this guy is more of a prop than anything else. And when she shows up, what's the topic of conversation? Perhaps she's going to be talking about punishing the police, because after all, the entire reason that Bloody Sunday even happened was because a bunch of racist cops beat up those civil rights protesters. So she talked about that, right? Of course not. Well, maybe she talked about a black hate crime law, because what happened to those civil rights protesters in Selma was certainly a hate crime, right? Nope. How about slavery reparations? How about not? Instead, she talked about the war in Gaza and this loose talk about a ceasefire.
So before I begin today, I must address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And just a few days ago, we saw hungry, desperate people approach aid trucks, simply trying to secure food for their families after weeks of nearly no aid reaching northern Gaza. And they were met with gunfire and chaos.
They use a black civil rights commemoration of a tragedy to promote and highlight the interests and concerns of non-black constituencies. Now, they would never go to any Arab gathering anywhere and start talking about black Americans' issues or talk about what black people need. And this is done so that that empty-headed black misleadership class and the pathetic activist class can sit there and clap like trained seals and pretend to be just so high-minded because they care about everyone else's interests more than they care about black people, and they have to do that because that shows they aren't biased. Never mind that everyone is biased against us. So for the few shea butter chumps around here who are worried about Gaza, never fear, the Biden administration has Kamala Harris advocating for them and using the commemoration of a black historical event to do it. Who she's not talking about, however, are black people. Everything she said about the brutality of the Israelis toward the Gazans could also be said about black Americans too. And for the few mushy-headed folks who consider themselves cosmopolites and think of themselves as citizens of the world, well, Kamala conveniently leaves out that her boss and running mate blocked the UN's vote to declare a ceasefire. Biden did that. And when you listen to Kamala's empty words, listen to what she says.
And the Israeli government must do more to significantly increase the flow of aid. No excuses. They must open new border crossings. They must not impose any unnecessary restrictions on the delivery of aid. They must ensure humanitarian personnel, sites, and convoys are not targeted. And they must work to restore basic services and promote order in Gaza so more food, water, and fuel can reach those in need.
Is the typical mealy-mouthed words, the Israelis must do more, not impose any unnecessary restrictions on aid, and restore basic services. And she said the Israelis must open new border crossings. The Palestinians don't want to cross the border. They don't want to go into Egypt or into Jordan. They want to stay exactly where they are. It's the Israelis who want them to go across that border, so once they're driven out into Egypt or into Jordan, out into the Sinai Desert, the Israelis then will bring in the IDF, just like they've done all over the West Bank, and they'll aim their tank cannons and their guns at the Palestinians, just like they've done in the West Bank, and tell them if you even try to set one foot here, we'll kill you dead. It's the Israelis who want to make sure that there's open borders so that they can drive the Palestinians out. She's sitting here naming everything that Benjamin Netanyahu wants and saying, the Israelis must do more of what Benjamin Netanyahu wants, and talking as if this is what the Palestinians have been demanding. No, they've been demanding exactly the opposite. This is what Benjamin Netanyahu has been demanding. It's all nothing but a bunch of fork-tongued gibberish. Instead of saying the Israelis must do more to get aid into those areas, she should have said the Israelis have to stop blocking the aid. Because that's what's happening. That's why the aid's not getting in. Instead of saying don't impose any unnecessary restrictions, she should have said just don't impose any restrictions at all. All that the administration's doing is repeating the same old hot air that they had other people doing. Nothing about the massive body count being a war crime or holding accountable those in the Israeli government. It's just more of the same old repetition that the people killed were just collateral damage and Israel didn't intend to kill them. Super Tuesday is tomorrow, so obviously the audience for this little display happens to be the disaffected Arab American voters, white liberals, and other constituencies who feel some kind of way about what's going on in the Middle East right now. This little show by Harris is nothing more than political theater, put on for their benefit. But the people they're trying to deceive with this vaudeville video won't buy it. They already know that all Biden has to do to stop this war in its tracks is to simply cut off all military and financial aid to Israel, and Benjamin Netanyahu's war machine would grind to a halt instantly. Everyone knows that. So phony tough talk's not going to fool anyone. And by the way, Harris's husband, Douglas Emhoff, who was present, by the way, but not talked about, as usual, he's Jewish. I wonder why the white media hasn't been pressing the second hubby about what he thinks about the war in Gaza. Whether or not he agrees with anything that his wife said. What does he think ought to be done? Does he feel that anti-Semitism in America is simply off the charts and out of control? He was right there, and yet nobody thought to ask him. But the main person who the white media and the white left are trying to keep off the spot is Biden himself. Not that the white media is too desirous to make him squirm. Kamala Harris's little speech won't get much airtime. She has no authority and even less respect. The administration hopes that people will lose interest in Gaza because both the administrative and propaganda arms of white supremacy have a bias for Israel. But people aren't just believing whatever the mainstream media tells them anymore. So now they have to do pathetic CYA maneuvers like this. So their shills and plants and campaign people will be able to say, see, Kamala Harris said the Israelis have to do better, so you can't say the White House hasn't done anything. So now all you people should stop complaining and just go to the polls, see? My problem, though, is that once again, everyone else gets shoehorned into events that are supposed to be focusing on us. The march across Edmund Pettus Bridge is remembered every year because this was an incident of racial violence by the state. But it didn't happen to Palestinians, and it didn't happen overseas. It happened to black people right here in the U.S. And to use this occasion as a springboard to talk about events and issues outside the U.S. that have nothing to do with black people, to say nothing about the need to punish the police, say nothing about a black hate crime law, and nothing about reparations, that shows that the administration has more contempt for black people than it does for the bleeding heart activists who are so concerned about Gaza in the first place. This is just like when Biden was protested at Mother Emanuel Church. The white people who did that, they used the media attention that was given to that church because it was the site of a massacre of black people, and they took that as an opportunity to get attention off of black folks and put it onto everybody else. Something these white activists would never do on behalf of black people. You're never going to see any of them go to some LGBT event or into a Muslim mosque or anywhere else and then start making noise to bring attention to the plight of black people. They don't do that. These activists' willingness to disturb the peace and make a spectacle of themselves, it only goes one way. And this is why we have no business taking sides in the latest war in the Middle East. Everyone's already focused on that. Nobody's focused on us. Tragically, that includes a lot of black people too. So we're going to put the spotlight where it belongs. Neither Biden nor Harris nor anyone else has said a word about us or what we're going to get. And that's the entire idea. And for the few of you who might decide that even though I've said this, it doesn't matter that much to you, the folks who are going to say, well, yeah, Professor, but what if this time they actually do start focusing on black people and our tangibles? If they give us serious, concrete promises to deliver on reparations, don't that mean we should at least consider voting for them? Well, to that I say, we'll cross that bridge if we ever get to it. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Eric Bailey, Morris Bodden, Amir Miller, DPB79, and Stephanie Rozelle. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.